Hi, I'm here with Jeff Weisenberg from National Card Investors.
Yes.
You do sports memorabilia here in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, right? You're on the
Northborough.
Shrewsbury-Northborough line. That's where I see your sign. And I'm a big sports fan. Used to deal with sports collectibles and big stamp collector from years back too. So I was interested in learning more about what you do and what the business is like now. So first of all, thank you for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Tell me a little bit about what you do.
So I've been in the baseball card and sports memorabilia business for about 40 years. I started when I was 10 years old, and over the years I worked for a company in Worcester for many years and started my own company in the 1990s. I buy and sell sports memorabilia of all types, not just baseball, basketball, football, hockey, golf, tennis, boxing, racing. Could be just about anything related, autographs and memorabilia. Business is good. I mean, the economy's pretty good. Stock market wasn't so good yesterday, but the business is pretty good. I would say it's probably at its all-time peak, which is hard to say because the late 80s was pretty big. And, there was some time where it wasn't so, busy, but I would say, speaking to people, the National Convention for Sports Memorabilia was a couple weeks ago, and speaking to people who were there, they said this is probably the busiest it's been since the early 2000s.
Oh, that's interesting, because in the early 2000s, I worked with a couple of companies doing fundraising with sports memorabilia. Went to a lot of golf tournaments after golf tournaments. They were very popular.
Yep.
And then it seemed to level off. And so it's interesting that it's come back. That's great. Let's start with who comes to you to sell memorabilia to you?
Having been in the business as long as I have, I don't do a lot of advertising. I do have a sign out in front of my house that says I buy baseball cards. It's been there for over 20 years. But basically right now it's a lot of estates. It's people who, go into their attics, they find their cards, they haven't looked at them in 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and it's time to turn it into something more useful to them. Maybe they want to go on a vacation, or maybe they just don't care about cards anymore. There are all sorts of different reasons, but for me, I think the generation of people right now that are in their 70s, 80s, even 90s, if they have cards from when they were kids or they have cards from when their parents were kids, we're at a point now where this generation, the younger generation now, when their parents pass and they clean out a house, they don't care what's in it. So this is when I think a lot of stuff that's been lying around since the turn of the 19th century, is coming out. I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff still hiding in attics. And there's a lot of stuff from the 30s, 40s, and 50s that's out there. And I think right now is a big opportunity for that to become available. So those are the people that call me. They find cards, they stumble on it. They had them since they were kids. They inherited them.
Sure.
And those are the people that come to me to sell.
Cards and other
and
memorabilia.
And memorabilia. For instance, that's a piece from Harper's Weekly from the 1800s, 1874. It's called a woodcut. It was an engraving of the Boston baseball team that was printed in Harper's Weekly.
And you have some magazines. So there's all different kinds.
Yeah, there's cards. I do things like, there's cards, Reggie Jackson rookie, Jerry Rice, Lou Gehrig. There's memorabilia. This is an early New England Patriots press guide from 1968. And there's other things like, these are Jackie Robinson comic book from 1949.
Oh, wow.
Boston Celtics yearbook from the 1950s with Bob Cousy. And the 1961 All-Star Game program, which was played at Fenway Park in a torrential rainstorm. So it's a very tough program to get. So I deal in everything from cards to memorabilia, autographs. For instance, here's a baseball that was signed in 1963, and amongst the signatures on here is Roberto Clemente, Stan Musial. So just about anything related to sports, I will deal in.
Wow. So let's talk about authenticity, because that has changed just in the time when I used to do fundraising with organizations, and I'd write all these teams and all these sports figures and get all excited when I got to, but there were no certificates of authenticity.
Right.
It was a different world back then. Now you really need certificates of authenticity on some things.
Yeah,
right?
On most things. It's really complex now because there's a lot of companies out there that do it. There's basically 3 or 4 major companies that are doing autograph authentication. You could send it to one company, they say it's good, one company that says it's not good, but in terms of easeability of sale for a big item, the letter of authenticity from one of those 3 or 4 major companies just adds a little bit to what you can sell it for and just makes it a whole lot easier to sell it.
Sure, because from looking at this, you're appear to be more involved with the cards, the books like this, things that are older, as opposed to, for instance, what I was involved with was the newer teams.
Sure.
That players would just, in their downtime, they would just autograph booklet after booklet or photo after photo. Sure. And those needed a
yeah, but even that stuff nowadays, even like, when the Red Sox won the first World Series in 2004, there's a lot of autographs out there, and then they won again in 07, or even a team that won recently. Those teams do sign things, but nowadays what they have is an on-site authenticator. So if they're signed at a private signing or something like that, one of these 4 major people will be sitting there authenticating it the second it's signed. Okay. So a lot of the stuff like that comes almost pre-certified.
And books like this don't need that.
No, they don't. There is a company now, CGC, a company that actually grades comic books, that has now started to grade magazines, Sports Illustrateds. Okay. So they do it. I'm not a big believer in sending them out because, cards, I understand, can be graded. You can still read the front and the back. But if you put a magazine or a comic book into a holder that's sealed, you're never looking at it again.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's one of those, okay, really? I don't know, whatever. So people, when they're cleaning out grandpa's or mine attic, older people,
sure,
and that's what they're finding, and they come to you. Who comes to you to purchase items?
Basically, I sell to dealers, collectors, and investors all over the country. I run my own auction. I had one last night, August 14th. I run an auction pretty much maybe once or twice, once every other month or so. I try to run an auction. I do have an eBay store. Where I sell stuff constantly, and I have a website. So basically, most of my stuff sells through eBay or my online auctions. Unless somebody stumbles upon me and wants to buy something, I get a phone call, random here or there, I'm looking for this, looking for that, or a dealer who knows me may be looking for something I have.
Okay. Oh, that's fascinating. One of the ways you got first involved was through Orlando Cepeda, and you created or developed a relationship with him.
Yeah, I've been friends with Orlando Cepeda, who's in the Baseball Hall of Fame. He got elected in 1999. A good friend of my father's and him met after he had been arrested in the 1970s. This was 1978. And we became friends in 1978, and I'm friends with him to this day.
Oh, wow, that's great. That's great. And I might want to say he got arrested for marijuana possession.
Yeah, marijuana possession, yeah.
So that really kickstarted you and helped you develop this interest?
That was 1978. I actually started collecting cards in 1976. I was on a family trip. It was like a month trip where my parents and my sisters and I drove around the east of the United States from Mississippi east, like visiting all the famous places. And at one point we were in Chicago, and a cousin's father had been working for the Topps Chewing Gum Company. And they had gotten a case of cards, which at the time was like a 12,000 card case, is how they made them back in the day. And he gave me a whole bunch of stuff because he didn't need 12,000. There was only 660 cards in the set. So he gave me a whole bunch of cards. And when I got home, I started putting them in order, figuring out what I needed, trading for the cards I didn't have. So that's how I started collecting. My first collecting days were 1976. I started working for a baseball card company in 1978.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. Yeah, the whole world, it's funny to see, particularly with cards. When I was young, we played with baseball and football cards. We trade them to friends. We played leansies and farthies and other games, before school. And then, yes, if we had 4 of the same player, they ended up on the bicycle making noise going around the neighborhood. I feel bad now because most kids don't, when they are given cards, and I used to give a sleeve of cards every Christmas to my son when he was growing up. Well, they all end up in the books, which is great, I guess. But the fun, it's like they were more fun to do stuff with back then.
Right, but the things that you did in your childhood with the cards is why they're valuable now.
Well, that's right.
Because if everybody kept them, then they wouldn't be worth what they are now. Nowadays, you're right, people protect them. They try to make sure they're worth money. I know the major card companies are doing, as much as they can to try to get the younger generation involved into the hobby. National Baseball Card Day was last weekend. And I know there's a lot, because nowadays the kids of this generation just don't collect. They don't collect stamps, they don't collect coins, they don't collect cards, they don't collect really anything. So where's this business go 10 or 15 years from now if we don't get them involved?
Sure. Yep. And that's one of, I'm a stamp collector as well, and that's one of the issues with stamp collecting. I belong to some groups on Facebook, and they're all my age or older.
Sure.
And and it's going to be like historic societies. I don't know how historic societies are going to be around in 15, 20 years, because it's all my generation.
Right. Is this
older.
new generation going to be interested in history of their town, in collectibles? There's always going to be the elite stuff, I think, in any generation, the $100,000 cards, the $1 million cards, the $1 million paintings, the expensive stamps, the expensive coins. People are always going to be interested in that, but that's not for collectability. That's for profitability. They're buying those things to hopefully make money on them, and that's an investment. So the regular mainstream stamps, coins, cards, or whatever, that's where we're going to see what happens in the coming 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see. Well, this is great. So again, if people want to get hold of you to sell,
they can reach me. It's National Card Investors. My eBay user ID is NatCard, NATCARD.
Okay.
And my office phone number is 508-842-2324.
And that's what's been scrolling along as we talked anyway.
Sure.
Have all that information. And I guess it's my own thing. I encourage kids to play with your baseball cards and football cards.
Go to a store, go buy a pack of cards, turn them over, read the stats. I know baseball games are long, and I know that's a problem Major League Baseball is trying to solve. Football is the new sport because they know exactly how long it's going to take. You don't have 5-hour football games and 2-hour football games like you do in baseball.
Right.
So, baseball's working to fix it, and like I said, enjoy the sport. It's an incredible sport, and there's a lot of things historically you can buy. Go to a card show, try to find a card from Kari Ostremski from the 1960s.
Yep.
Learn about who these people were.
That was always part of the fun for me, both collecting baseball and football cards. I'd learn about people maybe I had read about a little bit or heard about, mentioned on a sports cast, and collecting stamps. The stamp albums, and many of them still have a little blurb at the top about the country.
Stamp. Sure, the country and stuff like that.
And
Absolutely.
you learn something as well as having fun doing it. And
same as baseball cards or same as sports cards.
Yes.
There's nothing baseball, basketball, football, hockey, whatever it may be, but the information on the back is historically significant. Go learn something.
yeah, and it doesn't even feel like learning.
Sure.
And that's great. Well, thank you for coming and sharing this.
I appreciate it. Thank you for
having me. This has been fun for me, being an old collector too, a long time. Not old, long time collector
Right,
too.
exactly.
And appreciate your coming by, and we'll be right back. Hi, I'm here with Ron Goodrich from Northeast Collectibles. Thanks for coming. And I have been a stamp collector my entire life, as is my father and his father. And it's a sort of a world that's getting a little smaller, but you do appraisals.
Yes.
And you do not purchase them yourselves, so that when you go to you can get an honest appraisal and value, correct?
Yeah, I do appraisals and I help people sell things.
Okay.
But I don't buy anything. So the more they get, the more I get. I work on a commission basis, and we do pretty well.
And that's something I think, before we go into some of the specifics of what we both brought here today, that's something that's important for people to consider if they want to get a collection of anything, whether it's stamps, coins, books, whatever, to be able to know that the person that they're dealing with has some integrity and is being honest with them. That's a great way to work.
That's a good point, because there are mostly very honest people in any business that you're working with, but there are plenty that are not. And you don't know for sure if you went to the right one. And also, if someone is buying something, they want to buy it as low as possible so that they can make some money.
Sure.
But what I provide is the independence. I'm working for the seller. You brought me a stamp collection, a book collection, a coin collection, and I want to get you the highest possible price because I'm going to make a commission. And so I'm working on your behalf, the seller, not the buyer.
Okay, and I think that's a real important point for people to consider when they're, because people who come to you, and we were talking off camera, my grandfather, my father, and I and friends of mine, we all collected because it was fun. And we happened to learn things almost as a subset of that fun. Who comes to you now with collections or with individual items that...
Typically, it's people who have inherited something. They have no idea what it's worth. They want to find out. That's the appraisal part of it. They're giving it. Some people just, that's all they want. They don't want to sell it. They just want to know what is it worth. I did an appraisal for a former news commentator on television. He passed away. His wife came to me, and he donated everything that we appraised to the Library of Congress. Mm-hmm. And she took a tax deduction. That was the appraisal part of it. But to get back to yourself, your father, your grandfather, collecting anything, the person enjoys what they do.
Right.
I don't advise anyone to collect stamps, coin, books, postcards, whatever it might be, thinking they're going to make a profit. That's not the function. Often it goes the other way. They lost.
Yeah.
They
You invest so
spent
much
some
in
money
it,
and it doesn't work. Collect because you enjoy what you do. Now, sometimes it's a spin-off. What you collected happened to be worth a lot more than you paid for it.
Now, how can you tell? And what's the process quickly? Do you know pretty quickly? And to be transparent, Ron just took a look at my grandfather's book and said, well, maybe that's a charitable deduction. No, I don't know how much of that was kidding me, but you could tell fairly quickly from the...
Absolutely. Well, when you've been at it for over 50 years and you have reference material, if there's something that you are not completely familiar with, you have contacts of other people that you can run it by and get some input from that. We know from seeing what we see what could have value, what doesn't have value. But one thing I have to say, no matter what it is, condition, condition, condition. You can have an item. I had an item a few weeks ago. If you look in a catalog, which lists potential prices for things, in the catalog, this item was worth $1,000. Because of its condition, it wasn't worth $100.
Okay.
So, and the better the condition, the more.
Sure, and maybe that's part of things like this, where this was all collected for fun.
That's correct.
And so you put it in, you put the stamps in with the stamp hinges, and here they have sat for 50 years, and so the condition is that one of the things you're saying?
Absolutely,
the condition
absolutely.
Is
but
not.
But unfortunately, in what we see in that particular album, it doesn't make any difference because there
They're
aren't
all
any
fairly
stamps
common.
that they're too common.
Yeah. Okay, so that's condition, how common they are. So being old alone, or it's all your frame of reference, I suppose, is not the only consideration.
People always think that age produces value. Here's a coin that's dated 1683. It's a Norwegian coin. You want to buy it for $15?
Wow.
You know,
Yeah.
age does not mean anything, no matter what you're collecting. It helps. It helps.
It helps.
Because it takes things from the Civil War, for instance, Civil War money. Mm-hmm. The Confederacy printed their own money. They didn't use what we use in the Union. At the end of the Civil War, people were lighting cigars with the paper money because no one wanted it. It didn't have any value. But now, more than 100 years later, it's got value again.
Sure.
So in that case, the age and the history together proves the value.
And the market for, stamps, for instance, you mentioned that China, right now, China
Right
stamps
now,
are
if
big.
you've got some older, again, not something from 1990, but older Chinese material, particularly if it's still on an envelope. We had an envelope the other day. It had a very common stamp on it. It was produced during the war, 1942, 43, and it had to be censored to get through the mail. I listed that on eBay for somebody, starting at $10. It went for $248. Was a big surprise that might happen. We get involved, certainly not just stamps and coins and books, and one of the key things that I really enjoy seeing are autographs.
Oh, show us, please. You've got a couple of things.
I've got a few. Obviously, everything I see has been sold, but I took some pictures of some autographs that I had. This on where my top hand is Babe Ruth. No one would believe me if I said this is an original Babe Ruth autograph. So I had to send it out to get it authenticated by people who see things like that almost every day. It cost a little money to get the authenticated certificate, but it's well worth it because that enhances the value.
Oh, sure.
And this is the kind of certificate you would get. Now, other things I didn't get certificates for. Over here, a friend of mine went to a yard sale and saw this photograph and said, gee, I think I see somebody familiar on that. And it happened to be Mussolini. It's an original photograph autographed by Mussolini.
Oh, wow.
We got about $600 for that. This you can't see very well, but it's a letter written by Harriet Beecher Stowe, the creator of Uncle Tom's Cabin. She wasn't writing about her book. She was trying to get some money for some stock she owned here in Massachusetts. If it had been about the book, it would have been much more than this. This includes James Madison, President of the United States, an official document signed by Madison. You'd be surprised sometimes what people have because of friendships they have made with people that have got some notoriety, and they've got copies or originals of that. Excuse me, I'm drifting into something else. Do we want to talk about anything?
Yes,
Okay.
anything that, because people collect all sorts of.
Books. This is the Mohammedan Bible, the Quran. This is the first English translation, 1734. Probably worth about $3,000. This is the very first paperback there ever was. Paperbacks as we know them, size-wise and what have you, 1939, Lost Horizon. This is a first edition, Call of the Wild, very popular book. Very difficult to determine it's a first edition, but it is. That's a $2,000 book.
Wow. I just find it fascinating just what you have to be able to sort out for it to be worth really any money, but that's what you do for people.
That's correct. And I'll just give a couple of quick hints. People have collected these commemorative postage stamps. They buy the whole sheets. Well, if you want to sell them, you'll only get about half their face value. If you got a 10-cent stamp, you're going to get a nickel. But you can use them for postage. But, like here, if you got 3-cent stamps, this is when the postage rate was 42 cents. Look how many you had to put in the envelope.
Oh, sure.
You almost didn't have room to write the address. So what happened, now that we have the handheld phones and ability to get information, young people used to get information about history, about a country's location, the habitat, everything within that country, by collecting stamps.
Sure, it was always at the top of each page, each country page.
No more.
No.
Out comes the phone, boom, 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 and you got it. So young people do not collect stamps anymore.
No.
And so the inexpensive stamps, which are in your book, which might be in here, used to be sold to young people. No more. It's the more expensive items. Now, when we talk expensive items, here I'm still in stamps. During the 1930s, communication from here, to, let's say, to Europe, was by boat. Took a long time for that boat, probably almost 2 weeks to get there.
Sure.
But the Germans introduced the Zeppelin. The Zeppelin could do the same delivery of mail in 2 or 3 days.
Sure.
And so America produced 3 stamps in 1930 to carry mail on the Zeppelins. It didn't last very long, this mail carrying on Zeppelins, and people didn't have the money. Who had $2.60, which was probably a week's pay for a lot of people in 1930, to send something to your cousin in Europe? So not that many got used. These are very good and very valuable stamps. This one, and this happens, this is a fake. Someone took something called a proof, which is on a cardboard, put perforations on it because this is a stamp that's worth money, and they faked it. They fake coins, they fake stamps, so look out, and that's one of the reasons, like the Babe Ruth, you've got to send certain valuable items out to get them authenticated, because they might be a fake. Now, this is a very interesting process here. There was a postmaster in Waterbury, Connecticut, and they called him a wino because he used to take the cork from a wine bottle and carve out a design, and the mail wasn't as voluminous as it is today. And he would hand cancel each stamp as it went by him. But he did with what we call fancy cancels. This is, I think it's a horse, a man's head, a bee, another man's head here, okay? Those 4, which I didn't handle, I just happened to take a picture, are worth about $300,000. Not because of the stamp's worth a nickel, the cancels.
Wow. And we have to wrap up shortly. We could go on for an hour because I love collecting these. First day covers?
First day covers, after 1940, you can do what you did with this, start a fire. All right.
Well, that's very different. I still love these, and I guess as we started, we'll bring it back to the beginning. If you collect because you love collecting, continue do it. If you collect for an investment, don't do it.
Not unless you know more than the person selling it to you.
Right.
And your investment was at the minute you bought it. Right. Not over time. You made a very, very good deal at the beginning.
Right there at the beginning. And that's not what most of us got into stamp collecting or coin collecting for.
Just to pass it through. Our firm deals with many things, mostly things printed on paper. But coins come in there too. Again, similar story with coins. Modern coins aren't worth much. I sold recently $500,000 worth of gold coins, but they were all modern gold coins. All they were worth was their gold value.
Right.
That was good because the price of gold is up right now. But silver coins, about 5 times their face value. So if you got a dime, it's worth 50 cents. That's just current, based upon the price of silver.
So that's why they need to contact you and have you take a look at this. Yeah, every day it changes. Well, I appreciate you coming by. For my father, I still love collecting. For my son, sorry, pal. This is not going to be your ticket to an early retirement.
Something else, not Beanie Babies.
No. Well, thank you very much for coming.
I appreciate it very much.